Okay, so today, instead of being super technical, I'm going to give you kind of the cheat codes for how to write a chord progression in a major key. I just put out a video on making a major scale, and if you can make a major scale in any key, you can make chords out of that scale. So I might do a technical video about how this works later, but for now I thought, why not give you just something fun to mess around with? So, here's the deal. All you gotta remember is major, minor, minor. Major, major, minor, diminished. Sometimes I jokingly call it major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diner, because it seems to rhyme better, but it doesn't make any sense. But, okay, let me explain. So, we've already talked about whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That is the major scale formula. So, because that formula is the same for every major scale, it means, and again, we'll get technical about this later, but because that formula is the same for every major scale, it means that the order of chords in every major key is going to be the same order. And that order is major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So let's take the key of C, for example. If you want to convert a C scale into chords, all you do is make a C scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. You can include C at the end if you want to, round it out. Now, these are notes. Currently, they're just notes. But using the little secret math, whatever you want to call it. What am I trying to say? Using this little major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, we can convert all these single notes into chords. So now, instead of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, we have C major, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and B diminished. Now, if you've never played a diminished chord before, it's because they kind of suck to play. A true diminished triad, nerd language for a second, but a true diminished triad is almost never played ever. They usually contain 4 notes, and they usually take the form of a fully diminished chord or a half diminished chord. Don't worry about it for now. I'll include the chord for you to mess around with, but you could just choose not to use it at all, and you'd be just fine. I think I would wager that every song that's been on the top 40 list for the past 20 years has not had a diminished chord in it. Maybe like 1% of them do, but it's like a passing chord. It's not a chord you hang out on. We'll get into it later. But for now, let's talk about this. So we've got the key of C. Instead of going C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, we can go, okay, C major, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and I'll include a little chord chart for this, which is called a B half diminished. It'll work just fine in this context. So, now that you've got this set of chords, what do you do with it? Well, honestly, whatever the you want. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's just do another key. So, the key of G is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So those are the notes. Now if we do major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, we get G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, and then this F sharp half diminished, and then we're back to G. So those are all the chords in the key of G. If you're wondering why C and G are the most common keys to play songs in, it's because you start to have to use a lot of bar chords. You notice G has 1 bar chord in it, which there's an easier way to play it if you want to play B minor 7. Totally fine substitution. We'll get into that at some point. But for now, this is just usable stuff. So even just having these 2 sets of chords, you can make your own chord progressions. What I like to do is I like to make a little grid, and I like to think, okay, I'm going to do either like a 2-bar grid or a 4-bar grid, and I'm just going to fill it with chords. So let's say we got a 4-bar grid, and we're going to fill it with, from the key of G, let's do G, C, E minor, D. See how that sounds. It sounds great. If you repeat it a few times, you usually kind of get into the flow of how it feels. So that's a chord progression in the key of G. If you're sitting there going, wait, is that it? Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, this is where it gets tricky. So you saw bar chords, right? The more sharps you add, or the more flats you add to your key, refer to my video on major scales if you want to understand what I'm talking about. But the more sharps and flats you have in your key, the less you can use open notes. They just start to be not part of the key, so you can't play them. Kind of makes sense. So let's talk about the key of E major. So we've got E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. That is an E major scale. Let's convert it to chords. So now we've got E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, and then we've got, excuse me, D sharp, half diminished, and then we're back to E. And I just turned this scale into chords. And if you want to write a chord progression in the key of E, let's do E, G sharp, C sharp, F sharp minor. Let's see how that sounds. So if you're asking, wait, is that really it? Well, essentially. But now we get to talk about organization. So let's say I just wrote, well, let's go to a key that has open notes in case you want to play along. Let's go back to the key of G. Let's go... So we got G, D, E minor, C. Well, if you want to make your chord progression a little more interesting, you can repeat it with changes the second time around. So I got my grid here. Let's say first time around we got G, D, E minor, C. The second time around we could go E minor, G, D, and then just do D twice, like it shows on the grid there. So now we've got you've got this whole story. So, in terms of the key of G and the key of C, you've got that set of chords. If you're not familiar with bar chords, or if they're hard for you, we're just playing those keys. If you want to mess around with other keys, literally make a scale and then major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. I'll give you a free download of like a couple diminished shapes and maybe some ways to think about bar chords. I'll probably have to do a longer video on bar chords, but for now I just wanted to give you something kind of usable to think about. I mean, you could tap out now, but I could also run through a few more keys. So let's talk about the key of F. So F is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. So now we gotta think, okay, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and then we've got, ooh, half diminished. We'll play one up here, and then we'll go back to here. That's how much I don't like those chords. I just don't think about them a lot. You could also play one here, though. Hopefully I've got a chord chart up there or something, I don't know. But, so, if you are new to songwriting, or if you're trying to get into this stuff, I want to give you a little bit of advice. I was on a Reddit AMA. If you're not familiar with those, it's like a little famous person will get on this forum and, you know, they'll say, ask me anything, which is what AMA stands for. And in this case, there was an AMA with John Legend, and I'm not like, I think he's great, but I'm not like a huge fan. But he got this question that was, what do you do to prepare for an album? And he said, I write something like 60 to 80 songs or something, and that's a lot of songs, right? But that doesn't mean he went through the entire process of writing a full song for each of those songs. It meant that he screwed around with some chord progressions and hummed some over it, and kind of went, you know, like I did earlier. He might have written something like that, probably on piano. I think that's his instrument of choice. But he might have like hummed some like. And then just like made a little voice memo of that and went, yeah, that maybe that has some potential. And then he did that like 60 times. I'll do a lesson on what I like to call the, I call it a lot of things, but the main thing I call it is the Songwriting Pyramid, which is like how to prioritize writing stuff. But that's like a little taste of what it's about. And I guess if you're going to give yourself an assignment for this like chord progression writing stuff, don't sit down to write the best chord progression, because you're just going to spend an hour and feel like that was a waste. If you have an hour to work on this stuff, I would say write, not 50 is not a reasonable number, but, you know, write 10 or 15 different chord progressions so that you get a sense of what sounds good. I also want to do a lesson on the Roman numeral system, which is an awesome, awesome way to name all the chords in a chord progression, because it kind of makes sense that if the major scale is always the same and the order of chords is always the same, there must be a system to name that that's a little quicker, and there is. If I'm sitting in on a session and someone says it's a 1-6-2-5 in A, that tells me all the information I need to know, and it's a lot easier than them trying to name off all the chords or just name off all the notes in the chords. There's a really cool system, and I'll do a video on it. Let me know if that sounds interesting. Let me know if this video was helpful, and I'll probably do a little follow-up PDF that explains some of the stuff a little more, but it's that simple. You just have sets of chords based on a major scale. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it was encouraging, and I hope that you write a bunch of chord progressions. And if you can hum stuff over it, that's great. If you can't, I want to do a lesson on how to help you write melodies over chord progressions. Let me know if that sounds cool. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Oh, maybe I should play something.